What if I told you that for nearly 1,000 years, entire communities survived market collapse without supermarkets, without refrigerated trucks, and without weekly shopping at all? Picture this: a harsh winter somewhere in northern Europe, trade roads frozen, merchants delayed for weeks, grain prices doubling inside city walls, families waiting at gates that never opened. But behind monastery stone walls, gardens were still producing. Not decorative gardens, infrastructure. Beds of herbs planted generations earlier. Plants that regrew every spring. Leaves that preserved food. Roots that replaced expensive imports. Medicines traded quietly for grain or labor. While markets failed, the gardens continued. Today, we assume resilience comes from bigger supply chains, faster delivery, more convenience. Historically, it came from soil measured in square feet. That's the conflict running underneath modern life, whether we notice it or not. Convenience versus continuity. Because many suburban yards today consume 40 to 60 hours a year in mowing, fertilizer, watering, trimming, and return absolutely nothing edible in exchange. Monastery gardens did the opposite. Small space, permanent return. And today, we're walking through 12 medieval monastery herbs that quietly fed families when markets failed. Some replaced costly imported spices worth months of wages. One, number 3, was guarded almost like a wartime asset during shortages. And number 1, planted once, it could continue producing household value for 30 years or more. By the end of this video, you'll start seeing herbs differently. Not seasoning, but security. Pause for a moment. Because this story didn't begin with gardening trends. It began with survival. Across medieval Europe, monasteries functioned as something few people recognize today: stability centers. When wars moved through regions, monasteries often remained operational. When harvests failed, they recorded which plants endured drought or cold. Monks copied agricultural knowledge the same way they copied scripture. Gardens were divided carefully. Physic gardens for healing herbs, kitchen gardens for food preservation, and cloister beds designed for reliability above beauty. Most people imagine monks growing rare flowers or symbolic plants. But historically, they prioritized yield, storage, and resilience. Records from Benedictine monasteries as early as the 9th century describe herbs chosen specifically because they required little labor yet produced value year after year. Research into historical estate accounts even suggests monastery herb gardens often supported dozens, sometimes over 100 people using surprisingly small plots. Think about that. A space smaller than many modern lawns, feeding an entire community. And here's the belief flip. Most people think herbs are minor additions to food. But historically, herbs reduced food waste, extended storage life, replaced imported goods, and even functioned as trade currency. In unstable times, flavor became economics. And the first plant on this list looks almost too ordinary to matter, until you understand what it actually did. Number 12. Parsley, the quiet multiplier. In monastery records from France and southern Germany, parsley appears constantly, not because it was exotic, because it solved problems. Parsley tolerates cold better than many leafy crops. It grows densely in partial shade along stone walls. And once established, a small 4x4-foot bed can produce harvestable leaves for 8 to 9 months of the year. Picture a cook preparing preserved grains or salted meat through winter. Without fresh greens, nutrition declines quickly. Parsley filled that gap. Modern research suggests parsley contains concentrated micronutrients traditionally valued during long storage seasons, which explains why monastery kitchens harvested it almost daily. But here's the economic side most people miss. One dense bed can produce several pounds across a season, easily replacing $80 to $150 worth of store-bought herbs and greens annually in today's prices. Planted once, cut repeatedly. Minimal effort. Pause. A plant most people treat as garnish once functioned as nutritional insurance. And the next herb went even further, because monks didn't just grow flavor, they protected food itself. Number 11. Sage, the meat keeper. During medieval winters, preserved meat determined survival. Salted pork, game, stored fats. But spoilage was constant risk. Sage became essential. English monastery accounts describe bundles hung in kitchens and storage rooms because its oils slowed deterioration and masked early spoilage odors long enough for cooking use. Clinical studies today indicate sage contains compounds long associated with antimicrobial activity, which aligns closely with traditional preservation practices. But here's where money enters the picture. Imported spices during the Middle Ages could cost astonishing amounts, sometimes equivalent to several days' wages per ounce. Sage grew freely. One mature plant can live 5 to 8 years and produce multiple harvests annually from less than 2 square feet. That's decades of replacement value from a single planting cycle. Think about that contrast. Modern lawns consume fertilizer every season. Sage compounds value every season. And monks quickly realized another herb could stabilize entire kitchens during shortages, especially when bread supplies dropped. Number 10. Thyme, the stone survivor. If you walk through ruins of Mediterranean monasteries today, wild thyme still grows between stones centuries later. That tells you everything. Thyme thrives where soil is thin, dry, even neglected. Monks planted it along pathways because foot traffic released aroma while suppressing pests nearby. But its real value appeared during supply disruptions. Thyme preserved oils, soups, and stored vegetables. Research suggests thyme's essential compounds help limit microbial growth in food preparations. One reason it appears repeatedly in preservation texts. Economically, a 10-foot border planting can produce enough usable thyme annually to replace hundreds of seasoning purchases over time. And once established, it may survive 15 years or more with almost no watering. Picture that. 15 years from one planting. Now imagine a trade caravan delayed 3 months. Flavor disappears first, morale follows, which brings us to our first reality check. History spike. In the winter of 1315, Europe entered what historians now call the Great Famine. Relentless rain destroyed grain harvests across northern regions. Markets emptied. Prices soared beyond reach for ordinary families. Monasteries survived longer not because they had more grain, but because diversified gardens softened failure. Herbs stretched food, extended storage, maintained health when diets narrowed dangerously. Pause. Now fast forward. Modern shelves look permanent until logistics slow for even 2 weeks. We've seen glimpses of that recently. And the next herb monks relied on wasn't just food support. It became strategic. Number 9. Chives, the early spring signal. After winter, fresh food scarcity lasted weeks before major crops matured. Chives solved that gap. They emerge extremely early, sometimes while frost still lingers. Monastery calendars marked their appearance as a seasonal turning point. Small clumps expand yearly, often doubling every 2 to 3 seasons. A single planting can produce harvests for 20 years. 20. That means zero reseeding cost across decades. Flavor returned to eggs, grains, and stored potatoes when little else grew. Modern grocery equivalent? Fresh herbs early in spring often carry premium pricing, easily $3 to $5 per small bundle. Multiply that across months and years. A tiny patch quietly replaces hundreds of dollars over time. But monks soon realized early harvest alone wasn't enough. They needed plants that calmed stomach illness during difficult food seasons, which leads to our first story. A young novice named Mathieu recorded kitchen duties in a Burgundian monastery around the 12th century. One year, preserved barley developed bitterness after damp storage. Meals caused widespread stomach distress among workers nearby. The monastery kitchen added large amounts of the next herb into broths and teas. Within weeks, records note labor returning to normal productivity. Not miracle cures, management, observation, adaptation. And the herb responsible still grows easily today. Number 8. Mint, the recovery plant. Mint spreads aggressively, which modern gardeners often complain about. Monks considered that an advantage. Plant it once near water channels and it expands naturally. Traditional use documented mint supporting digestion after heavy preserved foods. And modern research suggests similar digestive support properties, but the economic value came from multiplication. One plant becomes dozens within 2 seasons. Leaves dried easily for winter storage lasting 6 months or more. That meant flavor and comfort long after fresh harvest ended. Pause. A plant modern gardeners fight to contain once reduced dependence on imported remedies. And the next herb might surprise you most because it replaced something incredibly expensive. Number 7. Lovage, the forgotten broth maker. Before global trade, celery flavor was rare in northern climates. Lovage replaced it. Tall, hardy, cold-tolerant, entire plants usable, leaves, stems, seeds. Monastery kitchens relied on it to transform simple grain soups into nourishing meals. Yield matters here. One mature plant can produce several pounds of usable greens annually for 10 years or more. Equivalent grocery replacement value today? Easily $150 to $300 per season in flavoring vegetables and herbs combined. Think about the compounding effect. 10 years, minimal care, and morale improves dramatically when simple food tastes rich. But halfway through this list, stakes begin rising because disruptions weren't rare events. They were expected. Second reality spike. During repeated medieval conflicts, trade routes across Central Europe could close for entire seasons. Salt shipments delayed. Spices unavailable. Communities dependent on markets suffered first. Gardens designed for continuity absorbed shock. Ask yourself honestly, if stores paused for 30 days, what grows in your yard right now? Pause, because the next herb wasn't just culinary. It became protective infrastructure. Number 6. Garlic chives. The pest barrier. Monastery writings describe planting strong scented herbs around vegetable beds. Garlic chives discouraged insects while providing food simultaneously. Dual function. Low labor, high return. A 12-square-foot patch can produce repeated harvests through most growing seasons and overwinter reliably in cold climates. That's months of flavor plus natural garden defense without purchased chemicals. Time saved becomes value too, and monks increasingly favored plants that worked while they slept. Which brings us to one of the most underestimated herbs ever grown. Number 5. Fennel, the storage extender. Mediterranean monasteries cultivated fennel heavily near kitchens. Seeds flavored preserved foods. Bulbs added bulk nutrition. Fronds dried for later use. Traditional records associate fennel with easing digestion after preserved meals, supported today by research examining aromatic compounds involved in digestive comfort. But economically, one planting cycle produces seeds usable for over a year. Seeds store exceptionally well, sometimes 12 months or longer. That's seasoning independence across seasons. Picture winter cooking without needing trade imports at all. And now the story changes, because the next herb crossed oceans, Microstory too. During early colonial settlements influenced heavily by monastery agricultural traditions, settlers carried seeds considered essential. Among them was the next plant. Diaries from frontier families described growing it immediately after arrival, even before permanent homes were finished, because losing it meant losing kitchen stability. And that herb still dominates resilient gardens today. Number 4. Rosemary, the memory keeper. Though associated with warm climates, rosemary thrived in protected monastery courtyards across southern Europe. Evergreen, perennial, highly aromatic. Branches preserved meats and flavored oils lasting months. Modern studies examine rosemary compounds connected to cognitive support, echoing centuries of traditional association with memory and clarity. Economically, a mature shrub may produce usable harvest for 20 to 30 years, one plant replacing endless spice purchases. Pause. 30 years from one decision. But monks guarded another herb even more carefully, because during shortages, it became nearly priceless. Number 3. Angelica, the famine herb. Northern monasteries cultivated Angelica in damp soils where little else thrived. Roots stored, stems candied, seeds preserved. During plague years and crop failures, Angelica preparations appeared repeatedly in survival records. Not magic, availability. Large plants produced significant biomass annually. Roots harvested after 2 years could supply months of preserved use. In some regions, Angelica products traded locally when other goods disappeared entirely. Think about that. Garden plants entering local economies. And we're approaching the point where monastery gardens stopped being food systems and became wealth systems. Third reality spike. During World War disruptions centuries later, victory gardens revived many monastery principles. Small productive plots reduced pressure on fragile supply chains. History repeats quietly, systems fail, soil remains. And the final 2 herbs prove why monks planned generations ahead. Number 2. Sorrel, the hunger gap breaker. Sorrel explodes into growth early spring when stored food runs lowest. Sharp flavor revived bland winter diets. Extremely hardy, often productive for 10 to 15 years. A modest bed provides repeated harvest weeks before lettuce appears. That timing matters, because historically, the quote-quote "4 gap" between stored food ending and harvest beginning caused real hardship. Sorrel shortened it. Time advantage becomes survival advantage. But the final herb was something deeper, symbolic, economic, and quietly unstoppable. Number 1. Comfrey, the living investment. Monastery estates planted comfrey along boundaries and compost areas. Fast-growing. Deep roots pulling nutrients from far below surface soil. Leaves harvested multiple times per season, used historically in animal fodder, compost enrichment, and traditional preparations documented across Europe. But here's the extraordinary part. Once established, comfrey patches can remain productive for 30 years or more. 3 decades, each season generating biomass that improves soil fertility for surrounding crops. That reduces fertilizer needs, improves yields elsewhere. Compounding return. Research into soil systems today confirms deep-rooted plants recycle nutrients upward, exactly what monks observed centuries earlier without laboratories. Pause. A single plant improving an entire garden ecosystem for decades. That's not decoration. That's infrastructure. Step back now. Because none of these herbs succeeded alone. Together, they formed a system. A continuity garden. Fast harvest herbs for morale. Digestive and preservation plants protecting stored food. Perennials reducing labor. Soil builders increasing future yield. 4 quiet steps monasteries repeated again and again. First, fast wins. Early herbs like chives and sorrel restoring freshness quickly. Second, kitchen anchors, sage, thyme, lovage, stabilizing daily meals. Third, multiplying perennials, mint and rosemary producing year after year. Fourth, legacy plants, Comfrey and Angelica improving future harvests. Convenience culture optimizes weeks. Continuity systems optimize decades. Look again at a modern lawn. Hundreds of square feet. Watered, trimmed, maintained, returning nothing edible. Monastery gardens asked a different question. What continues working even when markets stop? And that question may matter more now than people expect. Because in the next video, we're going somewhere even deeper. Not herbs, perennial vegetables that regrow for decades without replanting crops. Monasteries and frontier families depended on when seed supplies disappeared entirely. Before you go, I'm curious. Are you building convenience or continuity? Are you growing appearance or resilience? Because history suggests something quietly consistent. Empires change, markets fluctuate, but gardens designed for continuity keep feeding people long after trends disappear.